Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Conservation in Focus webinar. I'll give everyone a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll kick off the webinar for this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Conservation in Focus webinar. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. We have a great webinar in store for all of you. Just a few housekeeping items before we kick it over to Clayton to start our webinar. There is a Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom to ask any questions to the panelists during the webinar. We will hold for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to ask your questions throughout the presentation to any of our panelists. Clayton will address those and ask those to the panel at the conclusion of the webinar. So again, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom. Place your questions there. We are also giving away a Carhartt cooler backpack. It's a really neat giveaway. We hope that you all enjoy. We will be selecting one winner from our list of attendees of this webinar. We will be announcing that winner at the conclusion of the webinar. So if we share your name after the Q&A session and Clayton's closing remarks, please stay on for a couple more minutes and we'll get your contact information to get that backpack sent over your way. So again, thank you for joining us this morning. I'll turn it over to our Director of Conservation Agriculture and Farm Operations, Clayton Light.
All right, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this webinar for a while, and to get a focus on conservation is always good. So anyways, glad everybody's able to join this webinar, and we can go ahead and get it started today. So basically, a big part of this is we have our panelists, and we'll introduce them in a second, but we want to talk about partnerships, the power of partnerships, because in the conservation space, you know, a lot of these projects that we're working on are maybe leading edge type projects that maybe we couldn't do alone because we don't have the support or time or effort. But whenever we all combine and partner together for this, we can make some really good stuff happen. So just want to kind of go into some of that stuff today and highlight some of the projects we all been working on, and hopefully get some questions from you guys and show you guys the work we've been up to here lately. So with that, I think we'll start on some introductions for everybody, so everybody knows who everybody is. So I can kick that off. Like Samantha said, I'm Clayton Light. I'm the Director of Conservation Agriculture and Farm Operations here at Missouri Soybean. I've been on with them for just a little over a year and a half. And before that, I worked as a wildlife biologist for the Conservation Department. I spent most of my career working in natural community restoration and conservation work. With that, you know, my role is a partnership role as well. So a lot of our positions on this call all have partnerships as well. So I am an employee of Missouri Soybean, but I also get funding from the Missouri Department of Conservation for my role. So with that, I will kick it over to Brady to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Brady Lichtenberg. I too got my start in conservation world with the Missouri Department of Conservation in 2012. I spent most of my time there at MDC and as a wildlife biologist as well, doing a lot of land management, wildlife habitat management. And then I came over to mow soy on July 1st. So I've just been here a few weeks, kind of getting my feet wet, really learning about these projects that we're going to talk about today. And I'm the conservation programs manager for Missouri Soybeans. That said, it's also a partnership program, It gets some grant funding from NRCS as well as MDC. So once again, without the partnerships, my job would be non-existent.
Perfect. Glad to have you on board, Brady. We'll go over to Kurt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kurt Beckman, I'm the Director of Environmental Programs for Missouri Corn Growers Association and in partnership with Missouri Soybean. I've been here about 2 months. Prior to that, I worked with Department of Natural Resources, most recently as the Director of the Soil and Water Conservation Program, where I worked with a lot of different partners there. So I've been with corn for a couple months and look forward to extending those partners just as we're going to talk about today.
Perfect. Thanks, Kurt. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. My name's Adam Jones, Conservation Specialist over at MFA Incorporated. Work out of kind of our home office, so I'm all over the state doing different things. Also in a partnership role with the Missouri Department of Conservation and in RCS, being able to provide conservation technical assistance to our customers. So super fun job. I got my start in conservation, worked about 13 years, lastly as a wildlife management biologist, similar to Clayton for the Missouri Department of Conservation. And now, you know, self-admitted soil health nerd and still conservation guy. I also farm a little less than 400 acres up in Southeast Lewis County in my lack of spare time, as I like to usually tell everybody. So excited to be here, and thanks, Clayton.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Greg?
Thanks, Clayton. Greg Collier with the Missouri Department of Conservation. I serve as the Agriculture Liaison. In that role, I have almost 2 years, and I oversee 8 partnership positions, 4 of which are with the University of Missouri Extension, 2 with MFA, and 2 with Missouri Soy. So thanks for having me here today, Clayton.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. With that, I think that's our introductions. I think we'll just go ahead and start into the program now. So I will start sharing my screen and got a couple slides here about our couple programs that we're working on. All right. So basically, a project that we've been working on is what we call the Missouri Carbon Pilot. This is a pilot that we launched in March of 2021. So shortly right after I started on Missouri Soybean, we kind of launched this. Like I said, we're focused on partnerships today, so kind of want to highlight this is a partnership project with Missouri Soybean, Missouri Corn, MFA, and ESMC, which stands for Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, which is a mouthful. So that's why today you'll hear us refer to them as ESMC. But they're a nonprofit carbon platform that specializes in ecosystem credits that can be sold in a private voluntary marketplace.
Hey, Clayton,
we won't spend.
The biodiversity credit pilot slide is what's showing. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got that showing now?
Yes, but it's not in presentation mode yet.
Got it? All right. Sorry about that. It's showing up perfect on my screen. That's how it usually works. So anyways, yeah, so talking about the carbon pilot here, talking about the partnerships and ESMC, but launched this back in 2021 with pretty much a goal of, we're getting a lot of questions from farmers about carbon markets, ecosystem credits. What in the world should they be doing? Is this a fad? Is this a reality? Is there going to be real money? You all know the questions that come with this. So basically, we wanted to get involved to learn about it, to figure this out, figure out some transparency, give that to our growers, and then be a resource that's unbiased to them as well. So that's kind of a big portion or part of why we're doing this. Also wanted to get some real good science behind it as well, and ESMC offered that. So very excited to work with them as well with this pilot. So we had a goal of 5,000 acres, got a lot of interest with that. So within a week, we had our goal of 5,000 acres met. We had 12 producers ended up into the pilot. So year one, 2021 is already over and done. And those credits have been sold to General Mills on that. So excited to have that all done. And through that was a lot of learning, as well as some of the folks on this panel today can advantage to that, of how much we learned in that time frame. But anyways, that's a little bit about it. We're kind of running short, today with time, keeping everything moving forward. But more than happy to tell you guys about the carbon and water quality credits that were generated in this program and how that works, and especially in a voluntary marketplace and what that means. So more than happy to answer any questions towards the end of this. But with that, I might pass it over to Brady to talk about the biodiversity, which you guys have seen that slide already, but should be it now.
All right, thanks, Clayton. So yeah, we launched a biodiversity credit pilot in October of 2021. That was with a partnership funding from Missouri Department of Conservation, and that was to offer incentive payments. The incentive payments basically serve the landowners that were cooperating a low risk opportunity for those corn and soybean farmers for us to kind of run our pilot with. Main goal here was to not only enhance native wildlife habitat and biodiversity, but we also needed to use it as an opportunity to learn if there's an opportunity in the private marketplace to fund biodiversity credits. Basically, if you think about it as, rather than a cost share program that would provide funding to put that habitat on the ground, it provides a back end payment to reward farmers or landowners for the quality of their biodiversity and habitat that they created. With this, we're not looking to take acres out of production. The main thing we want to do here is use it to convert less productive acres and make them more profitable via the back end payments, and obviously help the ecosystem while we're doing that. During this pilot, we had 6 producers that participated, and all have received their back end payments through this program as of very recently. As far as what we look for in the future on this, we want to increase enrollment, obviously get more acres and more landowners involved. And we also need to work on standardizing a biodiversity credit criteria. We've got some of that kind of in place now. It's based on the overall size of the unit, as well as the number of native species that are present. But we need to kind of get down into the flowers a little bit more on that, and make sure that we're really accurately representing what ecosystem services these are providing and rewarding farmers based on that. That's all I have, Clayton. If you want to add anything to that I forgot about, please do.
Yeah, perfect. That was great, Brady. Yeah, so with those 2 pilots, some of the stuff that we're hoping to accomplish here is definitely, transparency. That's something I mentioned earlier, but with all the questions associated with carbon, we just want to be transparent. We just want everybody to understand what's going on, maybe behind the scenes on a sell and transaction of these credits, so people kind of understand where the money is going and how that all kind of works. So we are getting a lot of good information on that how it all works, and excited to share that stuff as well. And also a common theme that we heard with the carbon is early adopters. They're left out. An early adopter would be somebody who'd be already doing these practices. So with that, with this program, it'd be great to figure out a way to include them into this, maybe measure some of the positive benefits that they are doing already on their land as well. And that ties right into the biodiversity program, meaning that if you're already doing some pollinator habitat around edges of field, those acres are included in this. And that's something, we're wanting to figure it out. Are buyers interested in something that is enhanced or does it have to be newly established? And that kind of ties into the early adopters with that. And we also just want to continue to be a great resource for Missouri farmers. So that's something, I got a lot of feedback during enrollment periods of this is the trust, they really trust us. They trust MFA, they trust Quail Forever, they trust, MDC, these partners that we have on there. So they're willing to try out a pilot and maybe not be certain on a payment on that, but they're willing to try it and kind of get their feet wet and help us learn more. And also the price discovery, like I talked about, there's prices all over the board. Some of that is with incentive payments. Some of that is with the sale of carbon. Some of that is with the sale of water quality credits as well. So basically making sure our farmers are getting fair payments for what they're actually doing out there. So that's kind of what we wanted to accomplish with that. And with that, we'll have some questions at the end for sure. But I'll probably pass it on over to Kurt to start talking about the edge of field monitoring project that he's been working on. If anybody needs our contact information, I got it up there for Brady and myself right now. But I will stop sharing the screen and let Kurt present.
Well, thank you, Clayton and Brady, and thank you, Soybean Association, for inviting me here today. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Bear with me. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I'll briefly kind of give some background on an ag water quality monitoring program that both corn and soybean have been working on for the last couple of years. Actually, we're in our 5th year of this. So at the end of the calendar year, we're looking to put a lot of this data together and share with the farmers and individuals that may benefit from this. So try to advance. Sorry, I'm having trouble advancing here.
There we go.
Mine's not advancing. So I'll give a little background on what we've been doing. So what this incurs is we have 8 sites across mostly north, central, and northeast Missouri, where we are setting up some evaluation of basically runoff from some of the conservation practices. The most common practices that we're looking at are waterways, and then cover crops, and then of course incorporating no-till into the cover crops. At each site we have a control site where there's no BMP, if you will, installed, and then we're looking at the runoff that comes from that on rain events, and then we're looking at where there is a waterway and maybe cover crops installed, what the effectiveness is of those programs. This program actually originated, also another partner was the Department of Natural Resources. Funding to initiate the program came from the 319 pass-through funds from EPA. Actually, a 319 program is in the Department of Natural Resources. So that really was a lot of the startup costs for this. So another example of many partnerships. So really the program is committed to collecting water quality data, and the beneficiaries from this are going to be landowners themselves. These sites are all located on farmers' properties. Some of them may be corn or soybean members, or folks that volunteered to let us set those out there. So we're putting those out there. We're also obviously sharing some of the data with like the Soil and Water Conservation Program at DNR, because those practices are what they cost share on. So if we can prove the effectiveness of those practices, then we know what nutrient loss reduction we're getting by installing those practices. And then when we stack those practices, if you will, if we put one practice on top of the other, then obviously the benefits are multiplied, and we get sometimes a 50 to 70% reduction in nitrogen or phosphorus coming off of those fields by putting those practices on the ground. We really would like to get this information out to landowners in a way that they can use it also to make better decisions on the farm. For instance, those that are have these, we share the data with the landowners that we have these sites on. They can see that in a particular rain event, if it was depending on the timing of their fertilizer application, that we can show them how much they may be losing. So it may encourage them to really focus on their application. The timing obviously is important, or maybe doing a split application, if you will. So they're really benefiting from that, and it's helping them make better decisions. Part of this, I think, will result in a way for conservationist programs, whether it be NRCS or MDC or DNR Soil and Water Program. It'll help them prescribe a practice that best fits the land and best gives them a bang for their buck. We want landowners to still initiate the voluntary conservation approach, but by giving them more tools in their toolbox and making those in-field decisions, I think they will realize that they're not only losing some of the fertilizer, but they're keeping the soil on their land, and we're reducing, especially phosphorus, which travels with soil, that we're reducing the runoff and we're reducing erosion. So probably the next, like I said, 6 months, we'll be summarizing some of this. We'll be in opportunities like this, be sharing some of this data. I know some of the cover crop data that we got on a big rain in the spring where there's no cover crop versus a cover crop. Some of the phosphorus reductions were anywhere from 40 to 50% of the runoff, which I think is pretty good numbers. Now, if you go and look at the science of this, which is what we really want to focus on, is the scientific approach. That's something we encourage. There are a lot of studies out there that are similar numbers. So cover crops was a big focus. We have some situations where there was some tile drainage and no versus cover crop in combination with that. So the numbers are looking pretty good, but we will be likely at the end of this 5 years in December, we're going to expand on that a little bit, maybe move some sites around and try some other practices and BMPs so that we can make those decisions and help those landowners make those decisions. A secondary benefit of this, of course, is that we are providing that cover in the wintertime. There's also some practices I think that Soil and Water and NRCS are doing that may be native species that would be drought resiliency, even flood resiliency. And of course, then there's the benefit for wildlife. So those are some secondary benefits. I think, the thing is that landowners just sometimes need better tools in their toolbox to make those decisions. I know coming from the Soil and Water Conservation Program, they're going to start looking at doing what we call targeted conservation, which means they can look at a small watershed and say, this is where we need to focus. And by providing some of this research to them, I think they can make those decisions. They're going to have some models that they're going to run that will do the similar thing. And then they can focus on where they need to put the conservation on the ground. And I think it'll be a benefit down the road. So thanks.
Yeah, perfect, Kurt. Yeah, and as you will see as we go through these projects, they all kind of tie together with conservation, obviously, but the information that Kurt is getting from this water quality, if we know what kind of carbon is being sequestered from the carbon pilot, and then we start to know how much nutrient runoff we're getting with these cover crops and stuff. I mean, it all kind of ties together, and you'll kind of see that with Adam's presentation here about some of the work MFA is working on, and we're all working on together too. It all ties together with all that stuff. So with that, I can pass it over to Adam. Kurt, you might have to stop sharing your screen, I believe.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that done. I'd have to have someone override me here. My screen is locked up. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just, well, Kurt's figuring that out, and if I don't get to share my slides, it's no big deal. I can talk through about anything. But just to echo what Kurt said, that's some really awesome data that they're collecting. And just from a retailer perspective, as we're trying to do the best thing with the grower, or for the grower, having them in mind on nutrient builds and application dates and timings, and under a no-till or a cover crop system, what's the best time to spread? When are we minimizing losses from a retailer? It's coming out of the back of our truck, right? So that's just some really cool data that they're collecting, and the local nature of that data is super helpful to us. And so just, yeah, I want to say attaboy on that before I start talking about what I'm actually supposed to. What I kind of wanted to go into was, we talk about placing some of the edge of field data and whatnot. We talk about placing some of the pollinator habitat on the landscape, right? So where do we place that? Are our current programs that we have available, there we go, are the current programs that we have available through NRCS or FSA or some of the agencies that we're all very familiar with, are those programs working, right, for what we want to do on the landscape, to put in field borders or buffers or waterways, et cetera, et cetera. So I think integrating some of the ag retail space in with that is pretty important. So a couple just background slides here. I always like to do my best to take as many pictures as I can when I'm in the field. But there's some things that when you look at edge of field practices, it's like, I can go down the list of infield management, infield agronomy that we can do on the landscape, but there are some things that we just can't fix, right? So one of my favorite pictures is the top left there. They built this terrace so close to the fence line that we can't get an anhydrous toolbar down through there. So looking at something like that, are we going to be able to agronomically serve that acre in the future? Probably not. So let's look at something that makes sense from an edge of field practice. Get that in pollinator habitat or something like that. It's just hardly farmable at this point. Erosion is a good example, past erosion in the top right there. And then we all can kind of see what tree lines can do, unmanaged, kind of vertical tree lines. That's a pretty cool picture I took with a drone on the bottom of some soybeans. You can see the wilt out into the beans that shows where the trees are competing for moisture there. So if we're going to leave that tree line, that's fine, but can we do some kind of buffer there? And then how do we turn that into just whole farm profitability, right? Because that's where we want to get. We want to integrate soil health practices. We want to do this edge of field work. We want to make the farm as a whole more conservation minded. But how do we turn all this into just whole farm profitability? And if we're making money on a field, we know we are, but are we making money on the whole field? And so just in a lot of the work that we've done, we really show that we're not. And I know personally on my farm that I'm not. And then if we want to remove some of those acres from production, how accurate can we get? What are some things that we can do to be extremely accurate? And I think these are cool pictures just because so many NRCS FSA programs in the past have been, okay, you want to do a field buffer, so we got to buffer the whole field, right? We'll just take a look at these images that I've showed. This is the kind of the raw data on the upper left and the surfaced data on the lower right. And if I'm the grower on this field, I don't want to buffer that whole. I'm like probably the most conservation minded guy that you're going to run into on the street, but I don't want to buffer this whole field. I want to take out the spots where I'm not making money, and let's start there and work from there. And so how do we help our programs meet that goal? This is my favorite joke in the ag retail space. We can draw super highly accurate lines around problems you already know you had. And so sometimes we have the fix for those problems, and sometimes we don't, just like I mentioned in that first line there. But then, kind of where can we take this? Is there a grazing operation? Can we stockpile some cool season grass in some of those unprofitable areas and then be able to graze that in the off season along with the crop stubble? Or, what do we need to be doing? But the first thing that really pops to mind is just the initiation of that thought process that, hey, what parts of this field am I making money on? what parts am I losing money on? Why am I losing money? Is there an agronomic problem there that we can make an application or two and get solved? Or is it a lost cause? The tear is too close to the fence and those kind of things. And so just then knowing the solutions, right? We're blessed and we're cursed in Missouri that we have so many different programs, so many different opportunities to participate in. Cost share, CRP, we've got state cost share, just an awesome DNR state cost share program. We've got MDC cost share. The problem is that a lot of times this gets confusing for folks, and trying to find kind of a trusted individual that can guide you through that and say, you know, right now, this program probably makes the most sense for your farm, or kind of, I know your operation a little bit, and this program makes the most sense. And so just, you know, finding someone that kind of can sort through all that for you. And those folks are certainly out there too. And so just to go real quickly into the RCPP, RCPP is an opportunity for private companies utilizing private and state dollars in this case to bring more federal funding to Missouri. And I think that's super important, because we all know that the feds are going to spend money out there on the landscape. They're going to spend money in the continental United States. And so what can we do utilizing the partnerships that Clayton was talking about to bring as much of that USDA funding to Missouri as we can? That's certainly something that we're interested in. We want our patrons to be able to take advantage of it. I know Clayton, Brady, and Kurt all in the same boat there. We want folks to be able to use that money in Missouri, because we know there's projects out there. So we gathered up some private money from folks such as Bayer, plus utilizing some state money from the conservation department to match. And we're able to get a lot of good funding into the state. We just actually recently, our first sign up for the RCPP deal has ended, but there's going to be opportunities there moving forward to be able to sign up and use some of that precision data to be able to place field borders and make sure we're doing it in the right spot that makes the most economic sense for the grower and the most practical sense for the field and those kind of things. So pretty excited about that. And I think it worked out pretty well. I always like to share this too, just because, you know, when you look at some of that buffer stuff, it's like, again, a lot of times we try to buffer out into the field. And I'm going to play guilty here, because this is my field that I'm flying over with the drone here. But as you can see, I just very lazily let this timbered edge kind of creep out into the field a little too much on me over the last decade or so. And so just in about 2 afternoons, I went down there with the chainsaw and just kind of dropped trees parallel with the edge of the field. And that's kind of cleaned up some of my yield loss here. There is still an area or two that I probably need to place some pollinator habitat in this edge. But I wanted to kind of, don't pay attention to the tree. I accidentally dropped out in the field. I pushed that out. But you know, there's still some areas that I probably need to do something different along this field edge, but I cleaned up a lot of that and made some wildlife habitat kind of in the meantime there as well. So again, we want to look at the adjoining habitat and also the field boundary as well. So, and you know, a lot of landowners that we may be renting on or something, recreational properties or whatever, folks would be excited to have projects like that really kind of cross over and help us out as a grower and also help the landowner out as providing good habitat. So there's my contact info, and certainly happy to answer any questions about most of the topics that we've covered today. So I will go ahead and hopefully stop sharing and turn it back over to Clayton.
Yeah, perfect, Adam. Definitely always enjoy the work you guys are doing with, you know, return on investment for farmers and profitability and highlighting all that type of work and how that works together with conservation, because I mean, that's how things are going to happen. You know, at the end of the day, you know, farmers need to make money. It's a business. You know, they need to provide for their family and make their farm profitable. So if we can make it profitable and benefit conservation work, you know, we're all about that. So that's perfect. I always like those slides with the yield and stuff. So appreciate that. With that being said, I definitely appreciate everybody's time today. From the panelists, everything we talked about. I think we have a few questions, so maybe we can go into those, and then if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A again. So basically, we got a question here that says, do we think carbon markets are here to stay, or will they fizzle out? Without it being a fully public USDA or fully privatized, how will it sustain? So let's, I know I kind of talked about carbon, but I'll just go ahead and throw that one at Adam and have him answer that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question, Clayton. So this is a common thing that we get, and I think Clayton would back me up on this. Is a common question we get as far as what's the longevity of this marketplace. I think some of that is yet to be determined. I think we have a clearer answer now, though, than what we did possibly a year ago. First off, I do want to clarify that currently in the private carbon space, there is little to no USDA involvement or government involvement. I know we kind of get that comment and question quite a bit, and to date, USDA really has not been involved at all in the private carbon marketplace. So these credits are being generated on privately funded and privately developed MRV platforms, or measurement, reporting, and verification platforms. So they're verified on those private platforms, and then they're sold to private companies. And there's really no government intervention in any of that process. Every carbon talk for the last 12 months, somebody's used the phrase "wild, wild west," and that's why they use that phrase, is because there is no USDA involvement. I don't know whether or not we'll see that in the future. Some companies are pushing for some involvement, but I think are scared at to ask for what level USDA involvement we really want there, because we do want to allow that private marketplace to develop. As far as the longevity on the offset market, and I think this is what sometimes folks struggle to understand as well, and I know I did, but there is kind of an inset market. So if I'm a company that's producing a good, I may need some insets to offset my carbon that I've used to produce that good. And then there's companies that aren't really producing anything related to food or agriculture. Think of Microsoft or a Walmart or something like that. They're looking for a direct offset to offset their carbon emissions. And so those are two different things, and honestly, two different marketplaces. And so my answer to the longevity in the market may be different for each of those. In the actual true offset marketplace, I do think there's an end, or that there's a sunset there at some point to that, because if I'm a company looking to the private marketplace to purchase those offsets, I'm also going to look to internalize those costs, right? Why would I pay somebody for eternity to do something where I could just make a change internally within my company where I don't need them anymore, if you will. And so I think there could possibly be a sunset on some of those at some point. More of the inset credits, I'm not so sure, because as long as I'm producing goods, I'm still going to need that offset possibly. So that was a very long-winded answer to something, but it's just extremely complicated. And I think Clayton can back me up on that it's really hard to tell. I do think there is some short to medium term validity to most of this marketplace, though.
Yeah, perfect. And if you guys have more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A as well as we go through this. But yeah, like Adam said, the market, it's a privatized market, which is good. So you just never know exactly where that's going to go. But as of now, I mean, it's still there as we go. So the next question that kind of goes into this, I can cover is, will there ever be opportunities for early adopters to benefit from these credit programs? And that's kind of what I mentioned a little bit at the end of Brady's presentation there is, that's something we're kind of looking into with these pilot programs, is trying to figure out ways that can happen. When it is in a private marketplace, there really is no control over that, because a company's wanting to maybe make offsets or insets that Adam was talking about. I mean, if a practice is already being done, in their mind, they're not making a change that's already out there. They're just paying for something that has already been done in the past. So that's why there's such a push for newly established acres and practice changes for this to happen. So we sure want to find an opportunity. I think Bayer's program pays for 5 years back. And as far as I know, there might be a few others that are kind of doing some of that, but as far as I know, that's about it. on the early adopters, but I think down the road, there's going to be opportunities for sure with the Climate Smart grant opportunity that will be awarded this fall. There's going to be a lot of, they're looking at climate smart commodities. That's going to be something that they were looking at heavily, was early adopters. So there may be something with USDA dollars there to keep these practices going for early adopters and stuff is the way I would kind of look at that. Does anybody else have anything to add to the early adopters?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it, Clayton. I would agree. I think the early adopter thing is going to be really tough if we maintain the completely private marketplace that we currently have. I think you're exactly right. You're going to be looking at some sort of government program that's going to try to whether they use an existing program or something new, or trying to incentivize those practices based on other parts of the Farm Bill, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're going to be looking at something like that for early adopters. I just don't see it in the private carbon space, and they'll acknowledge it, but they're not really willing to budge or talk about that, or talk about changing that on the private side. So I think that's important to look at as you may be thinking about a practice change on a farm, on a new piece of ground you pick up, et cetera. You've got kind of a limited window if you want to participate in the carbon space there to get that done. So maybe something to keep in mind in the future.
Yep, and I will note this in the carbon pilot that we have in Missouri here. Most of the folks were already planning on making those practice changes as well. So I really don't feel like the money was the reason why the people in our carbon pilot were making those changes, if that makes sense. So, I think as it develops, there will be people who will make changes on their farm to get in this if the money's there. But right now, I mean, personally, I haven't seen farmers really going out and making a bunch of big changes just because of the price of carbon yet. I think they're kind of waiting it out. So with that, we'll move on to the next question. This will be for Kurt. Have you noticed farmers changing practices after learning from the water quality monitoring results?
Yeah, we have. So we have, in the first couple of years, we actually had one of those individuals where we were doing the monitoring. We had a field day out there with several of the partners. And probably there's two things that we can show that particular person up front is one thing is the visual. So picture the control site that has no treatment. It doesn't have a waterway, or it doesn't have cover crops or no-till. We get a heavy rain in the spring. When we go out there and collect those samples, they're in gallon-sized jars, and you can set them next to each other with the site that has the waterway and the cover crops, and you can just see the visual difference. So that's the first thing that they see. It's like, wow, we take a picture of that, we share that with them, and we'll be sharing this with, as soon as we start compiling some of this, we're going to be sharing this in presentations and more field days. And then the other part of it is that about 2 weeks later we show him the actual data, and then he goes back and looks at when he applied fertilizer and when what the differences were, and we show him what losses he had or what was coming off the field that was not treated. So that's two things that individual sees already. And then at the field day we've got him given testimony basically saying, this is what I saw, not just visually, but they showed me how much nitrogen I lost and how much I applied. So I need to make, more educated decisions with what we've already given that particular person. And I think the objective here is to start putting this together. And then on field days, anytime we have an opportunity to have those landowners that have participated or those that have a way, it's always better to have the farmers themselves giving some testimony. And I think we're going to have a lot of good data, and we're going to have a lot of good pictures to show them. So I think outreach and education is going to be an important component of the water quality monitoring as we go. Things like this, opportunities where folks can get on over a lunch break and we share this with them. So we're already starting to show those individuals, and I think we'll expand that network as we go.
Perfect, Kurt. I agree. That kind of ties into another question we got here. Warren put, this is great information we're providing today. Farmers and landowners would benefit from this by participating in these webinars. But the question is, how can this be presented to more growers and landowners, maybe by a county basis? So maybe we can all kind of go through this one for each organization and kind of talk about how we present some of these information or some of the results of our projects that we're working on. I can kind of go first on some of the pilots that we're working on that I presented on. We get a lot of requests to go maybe speak, especially over the winter time, it seems like, or at some conferences and stuff like that. So I know I have presented at some conferences, some meetings and stuff like that as well, but that is something that is top of mind. And why these pilots are actively going, sometimes it's hard to present because we may not have all the results, but that's something I think is very beneficial to push that information out as well. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing here. So yeah, if kind of everybody, if anybody else wants to jump in on how their organization, I know Greg with MDC would have a lot of
Yes.
opportunities.
Yes, and I'll just point out, Warren, we're inviting all the speakers today to the MDC Directors Roundtable that's coming up in September. So we'll be sharing many of these same projects with our MDC staff and our guests that join that roundtable. I think the value of having the data that Kurt's collecting, the information that Adam finds directly from the field and brings back to our private lands and our wildlife biologists and different conservation managers is invaluable for both the public as well as the private land. Obviously, as producers, we're interested in seeing not only healthy fish, forest, and wildlife, but also good soil health and water quality. I think it says a lot about the work that Gary Wheeler's doing at Missouri Soy, the way he's expanded the program, bringing on Brady, promoting Clayton, as well as Bradley Shadd and his work over at Missouri Corn. I know the Department of Conservation's director, Sarah Parker Pauley, is very interested in working with farmers and producers. And we're moving forward with some strategic plans to ensure that work continues into the future.
Yep, perfect. One thing that comment that Gary Wheeler's made is, Farm Bureau county meetings would be a good opportunity for us to present some of this information as well. We do host district meetings and stuff as well for Missouri Soybean. Missouri Corn does the same thing. Those are all good opportunities as well to highlight this work and information as well. Adam, what do you got going on with MFA and sharing the word of this stuff? I know you guys do a lot.
Yeah, no, pretty unique opportunity that I have to work with a lot of our staff that are working already kind of all over the state. So, my phone rings, I will say 6 to 7 days a week with questions from folks. And hey, I've got this grower I've been working with, they're interested in soil health. I want you to come out and talk to them with me and stuff like that. And so I think our kind of employee network and just our company network has allowed us to get this out in front of quite a few people. Obviously I do kind of what everybody else does is present at our district meetings on some things and conservation topics and all that kind of stuff. But I can assure you that any agronomy related staff training that we have had in the last few years and that we will have moving forward certainly has conservation related topics tied in there every single time. So I feel like that's the best way for us to get the message out is to educate our staff as well.
Yeah, perfect. Anybody else have anything to add on to that?
I might add on to that, Clayton. I think it's really important. Talk to different farmers and even some board members and other members of our associations. And, if you ask them about the programs that they've maybe signed up through, whether it be FSA, NRCS, or Soil and Water Program, as Adam alluded to earlier, Missouri's blessed with the number of programs that we offer, but that does sometimes offer some confusion, and some landowners may implement a practice and they may not even be able to tell you exactly who it came through, whether it was the Saltwater District or NRCS. So it can be confusing. So I think as partners, we have to help diffuse that a little bit and make sure that we educate those folks on when they're out there selling different programs to landowners, to make sure that they can reach out to member organizations and conservation and others, to figure out how we can communicate that among their networks, whether it be county farm bureau meetings as Gary suggested, but how to reach out to those small groups, because I think there's way to do that, and I know it's confusing sometimes. And working in that soil and water program, that a lot of time landowners just do whatever the technician may suggest, but they may not know what other options are out there. So I think it's really important to maintain the strong partnerships we have in Missouri.
Yeah, perfect. I can't agree more. With Missouri soybean, we do have the Bay Farm here. So I might have, Brady's going to be doing a lot of work at the Bay Farm, promoting through field days and stuff, and actually setting up some demonstration areas. I was thinking maybe you can describe a little bit of that stuff and how that ties into these projects that we're working on.
Yeah, so a lot of times it seems like farmers, growers, landowners are interested in these projects, but don't really know not only how to go about doing them, but what's it going to look like. A lot of guys are pretty particular with what their place looks like. And if we can set up the Bay Farm with obvious growing operations, and we have corn and soybeans on the ground right next to pollinator habitat or other environmentally friendly practices, cover crops and all that stuff, if we can highlight that on either just, sometime if a group of farmers just wants to come out and visit for an hour, or during big field days or large events, make stops that are specific examples of different programs and how those programs are implemented and what kind of benefits it provides your farm, as far as monetarily, as well as who you need to contact to make it happen, what needs to be done to make it happen, and then the obvious, here's what it's going to look like on the ground. A lot of times people get intimidated by large scale transitions on their land, not really knowing what's going to happen, what's going to come of it, what's it going to look like. So if we can show that firsthand examples, I think that would kind of bridge the gap of unsure landowners, that, and hopefully get them to take that final step and put some of that stuff on the ground.
Perfect. Yeah, I might put a little plug in here for our August 11th field day out at Bay Farm. We'll be sending out invites, or if anybody's interested, definitely come give us a call here at Missouri Soybean, and we can get you guys registered for that event moving forward. But we're going to be highlighting crops and conservation and new technology. So it's going to be a kind of a neat field day this year, highlighting some of the latest and greatest and upcoming technologies that can be utilized on Missouri farms in the future. So with that, if anyone else has questions, I'm not seeing any more in the Q&A. If anybody's got some, we can put them in. Okay, we got one here from Gary. It says, there's so many questions about all these programs, but why we have all the strong partnerships. So basically this is Gary's, kind of saying that we got a lot of questions about the programs, and we have strong partnerships, and spending our resources makes our farmers aware and always good informed decisions. So that's very true. I mean, all the work we're doing, showing it off, that helps them make informed decisions. That's one of the biggest reasons why we're doing these projects, is we want our farmers to make informed management decisions for where they feel comfortable making that change without just taking a big risk. So we would like to take that risk for them if we can, and see if this is actual really good stuff or not. So yeah, very good point, Gary.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your great questions and again, joining us this afternoon for the Conservation in Focus webinar. I thank all of our panelists for giving their hour this afternoon to join us. You can find the recording of the webinar on mosoy.org, or if you want to request a copy, please send me an email. The winner of our Carhartt backpack for this webinar is Landry Jones. Landry, if you would, please just stay on the call for an extra couple minutes and we'll get your contact information. Thank you everyone else for joining. Hi, Landry, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Samantha.
Wonderful. Well, Landry, my email is sturner@mosoy.org. If you wish to share your home address there, or you can share it with me now and we will mail you a backpack today.
Yeah, I'll just share it to you over the
Great.
it is 704.
Hey, Samantha, I'll see Landry tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
You're
Yeah,
just
we'll
gonna
be
hand deliver it?
Yeah.
Perfect. I will give it back to Clayton then. So that works
Thanks.
out well.
Yep, that works great. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.